Okay, so for years, you've probably been focused on one thing, right? Growing your savings, building towards retirement.
Yeah, that accumulation phase, it feels pretty straightforward in a way.
Yeah,
Save, invest, watch it grow.
exactly. But then you hit retirement, and suddenly it's a whole new ball game. How do you actually spend that money, without that nagging fear you'll run out?
hmm That's longevity risk, as some call it.
Yeah.
And it's a huge source of anxiety for a lot of people. It's
Mhm.
completely understandable.
Totally. So today, that's our mission. We want to cut through that worry. We're doing a deep dive into retirement withdrawal strategies.
We're going to try and distill the essentials, maybe find some surprising insights.
So you can build your own playbook, find that confidence for financial freedom in retirement.
And it really is this fundamental shift, isn't it? From accumulations, saving hard, investing for growth,
Right.
to decumulation, strategically drawing down those assets.
It sounds simple, just reversing the flow, but it's not.
No, not at all. It brings unique challenges. I mean, suddenly no more regular paychecks. That's a big one.
It's huge.
And you don't know exactly how long you'll live. Plus, market volatility. That sequence of returns risk.
Uh-huh. The timing risk.
Exactly. Bad returns early on can be devastating. And then there's inflation, always chipping away at your spending power.
Always there in the background.
So the goal, really, is to create an income stream that can handle all that market swings, inflation.
And last your whole retirement.
Yes.
All
And
right.
support the life you actually want to live. It's about balancing needs with the portfolio's health.
Okay, accumulation versus decumulation. That's a really clear way to frame it. So before we get into the specific how-tos, the strategies, what's really at the core of making that shift? What are those foundational things every retiree needs to think about?
Yep, good question.
And just how do you even start figuring out what your retirement lifestyle costs?
Well, it really has to start there, with a clear-eyed look at the lifestyle you want and honestly what it's going to cost. It's definitely not one size fits all.
Right. Everyone's different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once you have that picture, then you can start thinking about managing your investments through, well, I see them as 4 key considerations, or maybe tensions you have to balance.
Okay. What are they?
First, growth potential. You still need your money to grow faster than inflation, ideally. Otherwise, you lose purchasing power over time.
Makes sense.
But you have to balance that need for growth against, taking on too much market risk, too many wild swings.
Got it. Growth versus risk. What's second?
Second is guaranteed income. Things like fixed income annuities, maybe combined with treasuries or CDs. That gives you certainty. Predictable income for your essential bills.
That sounds appealing. Certainty is nice.
It is. It provides real peace of mind for necessities. Third is flexibility.
Yeah.
Lots of people want access to their money, control over it. Life happens, right?
Yeah, curveballs.
Exactly. But the trade-off for that flexibility might be giving up some of that guaranteed income certainty.
Okay, so certainty versus flexibility. And a last one.
Fourth is principal preservation. Just knowing your initial investment is safe. That's comforting.
But there's always a but.
Right. Investments focused only on safety. Some annuities, money market funds, CDs, they usually have pretty low yields.
So not much income generated.
Exactly. If you're too conservative, you might not generate enough income for your lifestyle, or you might just fall behind inflation anyway.
Wow, so it's a real balancing act between growth, guarantees, flexibility, and safety.
Precisely. And, the big question of when can I retire,
Yeah.
it boils down to wanting to and having enough money saved up to replace that paycheck.
And things like Social Security play into that timing too, right?
Definitely. You could start as early as 62, but your benefit is reduced. Full retirement age is 67 for most people now.
Born 1960 or later.
Correct. And if you can wait until age 70, those benefits get significantly larger each year you delay. So that's another factor in the timing puzzle.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. Those key tensions, the importance of knowing your costs. Now, let's get into the practical stuff.
The playbooks.
Yeah, the actual strategies people use to generate that retirement income. Seems like there are quite a few different approaches.
There are. And each has its pros and cons, its own philosophy, really.
Yeah.
Let's break down some of the main ones, pull in different perspectives.
Okay, where do we start?
Let's start with maybe the most conservative. The interest and dividends only approach.
Okay, living off the income, not touching the principal.
Exactly. You set up your portfolio bonds, CDs, dividend stocks, so the income it throws off covers your expenses. The big pro. Minimal risk to your nest egg, especially with FDIC-insured CDs or government bonds. Your principal comes back eventually.
Sounds super safe. Almost too good to be true. What's the catch?
Well, the biggest challenge, honestly, is you usually need a very large portfolio to generate enough income this way, especially in lower interest rate environments.
Right. The yields might just not be enough.
Precisely. And you're vulnerable to inflation risk if you don't have enough stock exposure, because bond income doesn't automatically rise with costs. Plus, relying heavily on bond funds or dividend stocks still carries market risk.
Yeah.
So it's not risk-free.
Okay, so very conservative, but potentially not enough income or still some hidden risks. What's next? A really famous one.
Yes. The 4% rule. Probably the most well-known rule of thumb.
How does that one work again?
Simple concept. Withdraw 4% of your initial retirement portfolio value in year one. Then adjust that dollar amount each year for inflation.
Example.
Sure. $1 million portfolio. You take out $40,000 in year one. If inflation is, say, 3% the next year, you take out $40,000 plus 3%, which is $41,200.
Okay. Simple calculation. Seems easy to follow.
It is simple, and that's its appeal. Gives you a clear starting point, and historically studies showed it held up pretty well over 30-year retirements.
I feel another but coming. It's a rule of thumb, not ironclad.
Exactly. It's not a guarantee. And its biggest blind spot is that sequence of returns risk we mentioned earlier.
Right. The timing of the market returns.
Yes. The rule doesn't explicitly account for retiring right into a big market downturn. If you start taking out 4% adjusted for inflation while your portfolio value is dropping significantly,
You're depleting it much faster, digging a deeper hole.
you got it. You're selling more shares when prices are low just to get the same income, and that severely damages the portfolio's ability to recover later. It can be too aggressive in bad times, maybe even too conservative in really good times.
That sequence risk seems like the monster under the bed for early retirees. So the 4% rule is a guideline, maybe, but needs flexibility.
Absolutely. It highlights the need for adaptability, which leads us to some other strategies, like systematic withdrawals.
Okay, how's that different?
It's actually quite similar in practice to how the 4% rule works mechanically, sometimes called the investment portfolio only approach. You set up regular, scheduled withdrawals.
Like a paycheck replacement.
Sort of. But you're taking from both investment earnings and principal. The portfolio is managed for total return growth plus income, not just interest or dividends.
So more flexible than just dividends. What are the pros and cons?
Pros. It generates income, allows for growth depending on how you're invested, you can automate it, and you keep control over your assets. Cons. Like the 4% rule, you might need to manage it more actively, and there's still the risk your savings won't last if you withdraw too much or the market tanks.
So still managing that longevity risk. What about bringing in guarantees?
Right. That's the investment portfolio plus guarantees approach. This often involves using a portion of your assets to buy an immediate annuity.
Okay, so dedicating some money specifically for guaranteed income.
Exactly. That annuity provides a guaranteed income stream, often for life, sometimes for a set period. The huge advantage. It directly tackles longevity risk. You can't outlive lifetime income.
Peace of mind for essential bills.
For sure. And you can often add inflation protection, a C-COLA rider, though that costs more. Plus, by covering essentials with the annuity, the rest of your portfolio can potentially be invested more aggressively for growth.
I see the logic. But annuities get a mixed reaction, don't they? People worry about losing control of that money.
That's the main hesitation. Once you annuitize a chunk of money, it's generally locked in. You give up flexibility and direct control over that capital. They can also have higher fees, and you need to commit enough assets to generate meaningful income. It's a definite trade-off. Control versus certainty.
Okay. What if you want maximum flexibility based on the market?
Then you might look at dynamic spending. This is really about adapting on the fly.
So spending more when the market's up, less when it's down.
Precisely. You set rules or guidelines, but you actively adjust your withdrawals based on your portfolio's performance. Good years, maybe take that extra trip. Bad years, you tighten the belt.
Seems smart for making the money last longer.
It definitely increases portfolio longevity and adapts to reality, but it takes discipline, real discipline.
Yeah, I can imagine. Cutting back when markets are down isn't fun. It could be emotionally tough.
Very much so. Which leads to another popular strategy that tries to manage both the finances and the psychology. The bucket strategy.
The buckets. I've heard of this. How does it work?
You mentally divide your savings into different buckets based on when you'll need the money.
Okay.
Bucket 1 is for the short term, say the next 1 to 3 years. It's cash, money market funds, super safe, liquid stuff for immediate expenses.
Got it. Your rainy day fund, basically.
Kind of, but for planned spending too.
Yeah.
Bucket 2 is for the midterm, maybe 3 to 10 years out. Think bonds, more conservative investments, less risk than stocks, more potential return than cash.
Okay, in bucket 3.
That's your long-term money for 10-plus years down the road. That's where you keep your growth investments, mostly stocks.
I like that. It feels organized. What are the benefits?
Big benefit is psychological comfort. You know your next few years of spending are safe from market drops in bucket 1. It allows you to ride out volatility with your long-term money in bucket 3 without panicking.
Protects you from selling low.
Exactly. The downside, it does require more active management. You have to monitor the buckets and periodically refill bucket 1 from bucket 2 and bucket 2 from bucket 3's gains. It needs rebalancing.
Makes sense. Active strategy. Any others we should touch on?
One more specific situation strategy is the short-term bridge. This isn't for your whole retirement, but for funding a specific gap.
Like bridging until Social Security starts? Or maybe funding early, more active retirement years?
Exactly, those kinds of things. You might use a chunk of assets to create income just for, say, 5 years. Maybe with the CD ladder buying CDs that mature sequentially. Or a period-certain annuity that pays out for a fixed number of years, not for life.
So a temporary income stream.
Right. It's good for those fixed periods, and it lets the rest of your portfolio stay invested for longer-term growth. The main thing is making sure the rest of your portfolio is still sufficient after that bridge period ends.
Wow, okay. That's a really comprehensive overview of the different playbooks. Interest only, 4% rule, systematic withdrawals, adding guarantees, dynamic spending, buckets, short-term bridges.
Lots of options.
Yeah. So for someone listening, thinking about all this, how do they possibly choose? How do you tailor this? What factors really push you towards one strategy over another?
That's the crucial step, isn't it? Because no single strategy works for everyone. Your personal situation has to drive the decision. Several key factors really shape your ideal plan.
Okay, like what?
First, pretty obviously, your age at retirement and how long you expect to live. If you retire early, say at 60, your money needs to last potentially 30 years or more. That might mean a lower withdrawal rate initially than someone retiring at 70.
Right. Longer time horizon, more conservative start. And thinking about family history, health.
Exactly. It's about a realistic assessment of your longevity. Second, your asset allocation. We touched on this, but how you mix stocks, bonds, and cash in retirement is critical.
The 60-40 split is often mentioned.
That's a common starting point, yeah. 60% stocks for growth, 40% bonds for stability. But that mix usually needs to get more conservative over time as you age. You need that balance.
Okay. Age, asset mix. What else?
Third, inflation. Can't forget inflation. Your strategy absolutely has to account for rising costs, whether that's through built-in withdrawal increases like the 4% rule tries to do, or by holding assets that tend to keep pace, like stocks or inflation-protected bonds.
Got it. Keep purchasing power.
Fourth, and we keep coming back to this because it's so important, market performance and that sequence of returns risk.
Right. The danger of bad returns early on.
Yes. A big downturn right after you retire can wreck even a well-funded plan if you're forced to sell assets low. This is where flexibility or having that cash buffer, that bucket 1, becomes absolutely vital.
It's a shock absorber.
Exactly. Fifth factor, other income sources. Do you have a pension? Well, you get Social Security. Maybe work part-time. The more guaranteed income you have coming in.
The less pressure on your investment portfolio.
Precisely. Which might allow you to be a bit more aggressive with your portfolio withdrawals or investments.
Makes sense. And the last one. It sounds like a biggie.
It is. Tax implications. You absolutely must understand how withdrawals from different accounts are taxed.
Because a traditional 401k is different from a Roth IRA, which is different from a regular brokerage account.
Totally different tax treatments. A smart strategy involves planning the order you pull money from these accounts to minimize your lifetime tax bill. Maybe tap taxable accounts first, let tax-deferred accounts grow longer, manage required minimum distributions later on. It gets complex.
Yeah, that sounds like somewhere professional advice might be helpful.
Definitely. And just to put some numbers around income needs, NerdWallet often suggests aiming to replace about 70% to 90% of your pre-retirement income. So if you earn, say, $63,000.
You might need around $44,000 to $57,000 a year in retirement from all sources, savings, Social Security, etc.
Yeah, that's a reasonable ballpark to start thinking from.
Okay, this is incredibly helpful in framing how personal it all is. Age, assets, inflation, market timing risk, other income, taxes. Lots of moving parts. So we've covered the shift, the strategies, the factors. Now let's make it really concrete. How does someone listening actually build their plan? What are the actionable steps?
All right, let's walk through building that playbook, step by step.
Perfect.
First, Assess your expenses. Get real about your budget. What's essential spending, housing, food, healthcare, and what's discretionary travel, hobbies, dining out. You need to know your baseline cost of living.
Know your numbers. Step 1.
Step 2, determine your income sources. List everything, Social Security estimates, any pension details, and then figure out what your portfolio might realistically generate based on a chosen strategy. Add it all up.
Okay. Expenses out, income in. What's next?
Third, choose a starting strategy. Pick one we discussed, maybe the 4% rule or systematic withdrawals as your initial framework. Doesn't have to be perfect yet, just a starting point.
A baseline to work from.
Fourth, and this is super important, build that cash reserve or short-term bucket. Seriously, aim for 1 to 3 years of essential living expenses in cash or very safe liquid investments.
That market downturn buffer.
That's your sleep at night money. It prevents forced selling in a panic. It links right back to that bucket strategy concept.
Got it. Cash reserve is key. Step 5.
Fifth, develop a flexible spending plan. Decide in advance how you'll adjust if the market goes way up or way down. Maybe use those guardrails we talked about, like you won't withdraw more than 5% or less than 3% of the portfolio value that year. Build in adaptability.
Plan for adjustments. Don't just react.
Exactly. Sixth, optimize for taxes. This is where it can get tricky, figuring out the withdrawal sequence from Roth, traditional taxable accounts.
Maybe talk to a pro here.
It's often a really good idea.
Yeah.
A financial advisor, especially one specializing in retirement income, can map out a tax-efficient strategy that could save you a lot over the long run.
Okay. Optimize taxes. What's 7th?
Seventh, review and adjust annually. Your plan isn't set in stone. Life changes, markets change, your health might change. At least once a year, sit down, look at your portfolio, your spending, the economy, and make tweaks as needed.
Stay engaged with the plan.
Absolutely. And finally, related to the tax point, consider professional guidance more broadly, especially if your situation is complex, multiple income streams, significant assets, business ownership. A fee-only certified financial planner can be invaluable.
Fee only is important there.
Yes, it means they're compensated only by you, not by commissions on products they sell, which helps ensure unbiased advice focused on your best interests. And remember, even if you feel like you started late, strategic planning and investing now can still make a huge difference.
That's such a practical step-by-step guide. Thank you. It really demystifies the process.
Hope so.
You know, that fear of running out of money, it's so common, but listening to this, it feels manageable. With a thoughtful, flexible plan, it doesn't have to be this constant source of anxiety.
That's the goal.
Yeah, our aim today was really about shifting the focus from just preserving wealth to confidently using it, enjoying the life you've worked so hard to build.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to connect this to the bigger picture. Retirement isn't just finance, is it? It's about turning those numbers, that portfolio value, into the actual life you dreamed of.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe ask yourself, now that you thought about these strategies, what part of your ideal retirement feels more secure? And perhaps more interestingly, what part might you need to explore further to really align your money with that personal vision?
That's a great question to reflect on. Aligning the money with the vision. We really encourage you, listening right now, take a moment. What's one insight about retirement spending that's stuck with you today?
Yeah, what resonated?
We're so glad you joined us for this deep dive. Keep learning, keep planning,
Thanks for tuning in.
and we'll connect with you on the next one.